So one fascinating thing that all the monarchs in England have in common is that they're all now dead, bar one, so let's take a look at how they met their grisly ends. Starting with William the Conqueror, because most of the Saxon boys' cause of death are unknown, and he either fell ill and suffered terribly, or he was thrown from his horse, got pretty bad injuries, and suffered terribly. However, when he was lowered into his tomb, his bloated body was far too large for it, but it was forced in anyway, and it exploded, spreading an awful smell throughout the church. William II was killed by a stray arrow on a hunting trip. Henry I apparently ate too much lampreys, which was a type of fish and a medieval delicacy, and got severe food poisoning. Stephen of Blois got hit with a stomach disease. Henry II went with stress-related illnesses after his sons rebelled against him to tear his Angevin kingdom apart, with the kicker being him being told that his favourite son John was also in on the rebellion. Richard the Lionheart, who would only spend 6 months of his 10-year reign actually in England, got hit by a crossbow bolt besieging a castle in France, with his wound later turning gangrenous. King John got dysentery. Henry III actually passed away naturally, but due to most on this list, their lifespan was probably a lot shorter due to the stress of managing England through multiple rebellions. Edward I got dysentery on the way to put down a rebellion in Scotland. Edward II, after years of bad kingship, was deposed by his wife Isabella and her new lover Mortimer, and locked away in a castle where he passed away under uncertain circumstances, likely due to the orders of Mortimer looking to get rid of a political rival. Due to Edward's close relationship with his male companions, rumours began circulating that he was finished off with a red-hot iron poker in the backside, although this is likely untrue, and there was also other rumours that he was let out of prison and lived out the rest of his days in Europe. Edward III fell ill towards the end of his lifespan, with a stroke being the fatal kicker. Richard II had his throne usurped by his cousin Henry IV, and he died in captivity of starvation, and whether it was his own choice or on Henry's orders is unknown. Henry IV had serious health problems throughout his reign, likely due to the stress of managing a kingdom in constant rebellion, with it believed to be epilepsy, leprosy, or cardiovascular disease, which finally sent him. Henry V died by catching dysentery besieging a French town, in ironic circumstances as he was named the heir of France after the mad King Charles VI kicked the bucket, but in ironic circumstances he kicked the bucket 2 months before Charles, missing out on his lifelong dream to become King of France and England at the same time. His son Henry VI did take that title though, although his poor reign led to the Wars of the Roses, with his Yorkist rival Edward IV imprisoning him and likely ordering his murder to get rid of his political rival, although other sources saying he died of melancholy while in captivity. Edward IV's cause is unknown, although he did like to eat a bloody lot of food and then forcefully vomit it back up so he could eat more, and that likely finished him off. Edward V magically disappeared in the Tower of London along with his brother, likely killed by our next king, or he's still somewhere in London playing a big game of hide and seek. Richard III, the alleged prince murderer, died on the fields of Bosworth as he and Henry Tudor went toe-to-toe for the crown of England, ultimately ending the Wars of the Roses. Henry VII had a lot of emotional stress in later life due to the loss of loved ones, with tuberculosis being the final kicker. Henry VIII, every wedding planner's favourite king, suffered a jousting accident and had an awful leg wound, leading to his obesity and ultimately his end. Young Edward VI died of tuberculosis after a bout of smallpox. Honourable mention to Lady Jane Grey, who was queen for 9 days from Edward VI's will, but was beheaded through Mary as she had more support. Said Mary is believed to have passed from cancer in the womb. Elizabeth fell into a melancholy after most of her friends passed away, where she sat in a chair motionless for hours before she passed herself. James I narrowly misses out on being blown to smithereens by the gunpowder plot, with it instead being a severe case of dysentery that finished him off. In the eyes of Parliament, Charles I got way too big for his boots, using his power for his own gain and not the good of the country's. And as the old saying goes, if you come at the king, don't miss, and the parliamentarians didn't, as they won the resulting civil war and lopped off his head. Following Charles's controversial reign, kingship took a backseat, with the leader of the parliamentarians, Oliver Cromwell, stepping in and becoming Lord Protector of the realm, and he caught malaria and refused treatment because the founder of the treatment was a Catholic, with him being a Protestant, before sepsis finished him off. However, he wasn't the most well-liked, with a few years after his death his body being exhumed with his head lopped off and placed on a spike, and the rest of his body hung in chains and then thrown into a pit. His son Richard Cromwell took over this Lord Protector role, however he didn't have the same support as Daddy, and he stood down and lived a long and happy life and died of old age. Following Richard's resignation, Charles II was thrust back into kingship, fearing that without a leader England would descend into anarchy, and he officially went to a stroke, but it's believed it might have been sped up as he was experimenting a lot with mercury in his later life, which led to kidney problems. James II, who only ruled for 3 years before he was deposed because the English hated if you prayed in a different way, went with a brain hemorrhage. Mary II and William III were joint rulers after James's disposition, with Mary going with smallpox, William III or William of Orange going with pneumonia after complications from a broken collarbone, and the last to hold the title of the Monarch of England and Scotland before it changed to the Monarch of Great Britain went with a stroke among other illnesses. George also had a stroke, but not of himself. George II collapsed while on the toilet because he had a heart issue. George III in his final years had his son rule as regent because he was blind deaf, suffering from dementia, with pneumonia being his final killer. George IV loved a bit of food and drink, with obesity leading to other health problems. William IV went naturally, as did Queen Victoria. Edward VII and George V both smoked heavily, leading to bronchitis, which caused them many other health issues, eventually killing them. Edward VII abdicated after less than a year on the throne because he was marrying Wallis Simpson, an American woman, on her second divorce, and this was far too much for the pure royal family, and he died because he was also a heavy smoker and got throat cancer. George VI, another heavy smoker who got a blood clot in the heart. And Queen Lizzie, everyone's favourite Jill, from the longest reigning monarch in England ever, she went of natural causes.